discourse and whispers of Nicopolis. The moonlight falls softly across the ancient stones of Nicopolis tonight, casting silver shadows between columns that have stood for decades now, watching over a city built from victory, yet somehow it feels like a place made for quieter triumphs, the kind that happen in the space between one breath and the next. If you could walk these streets with me 2,000 years ago, you would hear the gentle murmur of evening conversations drifting from courtyards, the soft scrape of stylus against wax tablet, the whispered prayers to household gods before sleep. This is not Rome with its clamoring ambition. This is not Athens with its endless debates. This is Nicopolis, a city that learned early that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones no one sees. Tonight, I want to tell you about the women who walked these moonlit paths, the ones whose names were rarely carved in marble, whose voices were rarely recorded in the great histories, but whose wisdom shaped the very foundations of how we understand strength, resilience, and the art of living well. They were here, in this place where philosophy wasn't just discussed, it was lived. In a modest house near the agora, oil lamps flicker against papyrus scrolls. The scribe works late again tonight, as she has for months now, her fingers stained with ink, her eyes tired but determined. She is not copying poetry or recording merchant transactions. She is preserving something far more precious, the teachings that are reshaping how people think about suffering, about joy, about what it means to be truly free. The scribe pauses, sets down her reed pen, and flexes her cramped fingers. Around her, the scrolls contain fragments of conversations, letters, observations, pieces of a philosophical puzzle that will one day be called Stoicism. But she knows it by a simpler name. She calls it learning how to breathe. You see, Nicopolis was born from conquest, but it became something else entirely. A place where former slaves could become teachers, where women could study alongside men in certain circles, where the old rigid hierarchies softened just enough to let new ideas take root. It wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But it was possible here to imagine that wisdom belonged to anyone brave enough to seek it. The scribe remembers when she first heard these ideas, how they seemed almost dangerous in their simplicity. The notion that you could choose your response to whatever life brought you, that external circumstances, wealth, status, even health, these were not the true measures of a life well lived. That freedom wasn't something granted by emperors or husbands or fathers, but something you cultivated in the quiet spaces of your own mind. She thinks of the women who come to listen when the teacher speaks. They sit in the back, mostly, but they listen with an intensity that could light fires. They understand, perhaps better than anyone, what it means to have little control over external circumstances. They know what it is to be strong in ways the world doesn't recognize. There's Claudia, the potter's wife, whose hands are always clay-stained, whose back aches from bending over the wheel, but whose eyes light up when she hears that virtue is the only true good, that her worth doesn't depend on her husband's success or her children's obedience or the approval of the other wives in the market. There's Lydia, who was born a slave and earned her freedom through years of careful saving, who now runs a small textile business and supports 3 younger women learning the trade. She nods when the teacher speaks about how we are all citizens of a larger cosmopolis, a universal city where what matters is not where you were born or to whom, but how you choose to live. There's Demetria, whose son died in a fever last winter, who sits very still during the discussions about grief, about accepting what cannot be changed while working diligently on what can be. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, her words carry the weight of lived truth. The scribe knows their stories because she listens, not just to the formal teachings, but to the conversations afterward, the questions asked in whispers, the way these ideas take root in the soil of real lives. She copies down not just the teacher's words, but sometimes, when she dares, the insights that emerge from these quiet students. Tonight, as her pen moves across the papyrus, she is working on a letter about emotional resilience, about how feelings are like weather. They come and go, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always temporary, about how you can acknowledge the storm without being destroyed by it. She thinks about how revolutionary this is, especially for women who have been told their entire lives that their emotions make them weak, unreliable, lesser. Here is a philosophy that says, yes, you will feel deeply. Yes, life will bring you pain, but you are not at the mercy of these experiences. You have agency in how you respond. The lamp flickers, and she adjusts the wick carefully. Papyrus is expensive, oil is precious, and this work feels sacred. She's not just preserving words. She is preserving a way of seeing that could change everything for the women who will come after her. Outside her window, Nicopolis sleeps under its blanket of stars, the same stars that shine on Rome, where emperors plot their next conquests, the same stars that shine on distant provinces where people struggle under the weight of taxation and uncertainty. But here, in this quiet city built on the shores of the Ambracian Gulf, something different is being born. A philosophy of inner freedom, of resilience that doesn't depend on circumstances, of strength that grows not from domination, but from understanding, of wisdom that belongs not to the powerful, but to anyone willing to examine their own thoughts, their own reactions, their own choices. The scribe reads over what she has written tonight. Words about how we suffer more in imagination than in reality, about how the present moment is the only one we truly possess, about how courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. She thinks of the women who will read these words, perhaps not for decades, perhaps not for centuries. Women who will feel tired, overwhelmed, pulled in too many directions. Women who will wonder if they are strong enough for whatever they are facing. Women who need to know that they are part of an ancient lineage of quiet strength. The moon has moved across the sky now, and the scribe's eyes are growing heavy. But she has captured something important tonight. Not just philosophy, but philosophy lived. Not just ideas, but ideas tested in the crucible of daily life by women who had every reason to despair and chose wisdom instead. She rolls the papyrus carefully, seals it with wax, and sets it with the others. Tomorrow there will be more to preserve, more voices to listen to, more wisdom to gather from the margins where women have always done their thinking. But tonight she has done enough. The teachings are safe. The voices are recorded. The lineage continues. As she extinguishes the lamp, the room fills with gentle darkness. But somehow, it doesn't feel empty. It feels full of possibility, full of the quiet revolution that happens when people discover they are stronger than they knew, when they learn that freedom is not something you are given, but something you practice. And in that darkness, in that silence, something ancient and enduring settles over Nicopolis like a blessing. The knowledge that wisdom is being preserved, that voices long silenced are being recorded, that somewhere in the future, women will find these teachings and recognize themselves in them. The moon continues its journey across the star-scattered sky, and the city sleeps. But the work continues, in dreams, in hopes, in the quiet determination of those who understand that the most important victories are often the ones that happen in the sanctuary of the human heart. This is where our story begins, in a place where philosophy met real life, where ancient wisdom took root in modern hearts, where women discovered that they had always been stronger than the world told them they were. Echoes of Epictetus, The morning light filters through the olive trees surrounding the school, casting gentle shadows across the courtyard where students have already begun to gather. The air carries the salt tang of the Adriatic, that eternal rhythm of waves that has witnessed countless generations of seekers, dreamers, and those brave enough to question what they've been told about their place in the world. Here, in this sanctuary of learning, the day begins not with the harsh demands of the outside world, but with something far more radical, the suggestion that you might actually have control over your own thoughts, your own responses, your own inner landscape. Epictetus moves among his students with the careful gait of someone who has learned to navigate the world differently. His words carry the weight of lived experience, the understanding that comes not from theory, but from the deep wells of personal struggle. Some things, he says, his voice carrying across the morning air, are within our power, while others are not. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But as the scribe carefully records these words, his stylus moving across the wax tablet with practiced precision, he notices how the women in the group lean forward slightly, how their faces change when they hear this fundamental teaching. Because for them, for those who have spent their lives being told that nothing is within their power, this is nothing short of revolutionary. Within our power are our opinion, our motivation, our desire, our aversion, and our mental faculties. The teacher's words settle into the morning stillness like seeds finding fertile ground. Outside our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our position, and whatever is not our own mental work. A young woman shifts on her stone seat, her himation drawn close against the morning coolness. She thinks of her husband's moods, the way she has learned to read the set of his shoulders when he returns from the forum, the careful dance she performs to keep peace in her household. She thinks of her children's futures, how she lies awake planning, worrying, trying to control outcomes that stretch far beyond her reach. And now, this stranger with the weathered face and knowing eyes is telling her that perhaps she has been fighting the wrong battles entirely. The scribe pauses in his writing, watching as understanding begins to dawn on faces throughout the gathering. He has seen this moment before. The instant when someone realizes that the prison they thought was locked from the outside has actually been opened from within all along. We suffer not from the events in our lives, Epictetus continues, but from our judgment on those events. His words drift across the courtyard like incense, settling into hearts that have carried so much judgment, so much self-blame, so many stories about what they should have done differently. The sound of the sea grows stronger as the morning breeze picks up, carrying with it the cries of gulls and the distant voices of fishermen preparing their nets. But here, in this protected space, there is only the gentle exploration of ideas that could change everything, if you let them. A woman near the back of the group raises her hand tentatively. She's older than some of the others, her hair silver beneath her veil, her hands marked by years of work. "But Master," she says, her voice carrying the tremor of someone unused to speaking in such gatherings, "what of our duties? What of the expectations placed upon us?" The question hangs in the air like morning mist, because this is where philosophy meets the complicated reality of women's lives. This is where ancient wisdom must prove itself against the daily challenges of those who cannot simply walk away from their responsibilities, their relationships, their roles. Epictetus nods slowly, and there is something in his expression that suggests he has been waiting for exactly this question. "The impediment to action advances action," he says. "What stands in the way becomes the way." The scribe's stylus moves faster now, trying to capture not just the words, but the energy in the air. The sense that something important is being born in this moment. He thinks of his own life, the careful balance he maintains between his work here and his duties in the city. The way he has learned to find freedom not by escaping his circumstances, but by changing his relationship to them. You have power over your mind, the teacher continues, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The words settle into the gathering like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples of possibility in all directions. A young mother thinks of the sleepless nights with her infant, how she has been fighting against the exhaustion instead of accepting it as part of this season of her life. An older woman considers the resentment she has carried toward her aging parents, how she has been battling against their needs instead of finding meaning in her care for them. The morning grows warmer, and some of the students begin to move toward the shade of the covered walkway. But the conversation continues. This exploration of what it means to live with wisdom in a world that often seems designed to test every principle you hold dear. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, Epictetus says, settling himself on a stone bench worn smooth by countless such gatherings, but in having few wants. The scribe looks up from his writing, watching as several women exchange glances. He knows what they are thinking. How do you have few wants when your children need food, when your household requires management, when your very survival depends on maintaining relationships with people whose approval feels essential? But perhaps that is exactly the point. Perhaps wisdom is not about having an easy life, but about finding peace within whatever life you have been given. A gentle breeze stirs the olive branches overhead, creating patterns of light and shadow that dance across the assembled faces. The sea continues its eternal conversation with the shore. A reminder that some things endure beyond all human worry, all human striving, all human attempts to control what cannot be controlled. No one can hurt you without your permission, the teacher says, and his words carry the authority of someone who has tested this truth in the crucible of his own experience. The woman who asked the earlier question leans back against the stone wall, her eyes closed, letting the words wash over her like cool water on fevered skin. She thinks of all the times she has given away her peace, handed it over to others as if it were theirs to take. She thinks of all the nights she has lain awake, replaying conversations, rehearsing arguments, trying to change things that have already happened. And slowly, very slowly, she begins to understand what freedom might actually look like. The scribe sets down his stylus for a moment, flexing fingers that have grown stiff from writing. Around him, the morning continues its gentle unfoldment, students discussing what they have heard, asking questions that probe deeper into these ideas that promise so much and demand so much in return. Because this is the thing about Stoic philosophy. It offers no easy answers, no quick fixes, no promises that life will become simple. Instead, it offers something far more valuable. The possibility that you might discover resources within yourself that you never knew existed. The possibility that strength was never about controlling everything around you, but about mastering the one thing that was always, truly, completely yours. Your own response to whatever comes. A stroll along the coast. The scribe sets down his stylus as the evening deepens around him. His hand aches from hours of careful work, and his eyes strain from the flickering lamplight. Outside his small chamber, the Mediterranean night calls to him, gentle and vast and infinitely patient. He rises slowly, stretching muscles that have grown stiff from hunching over parchment. The philosophical discussions of the day still echo in his mind, those revolutionary ideas about freedom and choice that seem to resonate so deeply with the women who gather to listen. But now, in this quiet hour, he feels the pull of something even more fundamental. The ancient rhythm of sea and sky that has witnessed countless generations of human struggle and discovery. The coastal path near Nicopolis winds along cliffs that have stood here since before philosophy had a name. Tonight, under a canopy of stars that seem close enough to touch, the scribe walks slowly, letting his feet find their own pace, letting his mind settle into the deeper currents of thought that only emerge in solitude. The Stoics speak often of living in harmony with nature, not as some abstract concept, but as a practical way of being in the world. Here, with the salt air filling his lungs and the steady rhythm of waves below, this idea takes on new meaning. Nature asks nothing of him tonight. The sea doesn't demand that he be more productive, more successful, more anything. The stars don't judge his progress or compare him to others. The gentle breeze that stirs the olive trees doesn't require him to justify his existence or prove his worth. This is what Epictetus means when he speaks of the natural order, not a set of rules to follow, but a way of being that flows from understanding your place in the larger whole. The scribe pauses at a rocky outcrop where the path curves closer to the sea. Below, moonlight dances on water that stretches to the horizon, infinite and unknowable and somehow perfectly complete, just as it is. He thinks of the women who sat in the shadows today, absorbing teachings that might transform how they see themselves and their lives. Many of them carry burdens that would crush a weaker spirit, the weight of others' expectations, the constant pressure to be everything to everyone, the exhaustion that comes from a lifetime of putting their own needs last. But here, in this moment, none of that matters. Here there is only the vast simplicity of existence itself, waves that have been washing these shores since before human memory, stars that have watched over countless struggles and triumphs, wind that carries no judgment, only the clean scent of sea and stone. The Stoic philosophers understand something profound about contentment. It's not found in getting what you want. It's found in wanting what you have, not in the sense of settling for less, but in the deeper recognition that this moment, exactly as it is, contains everything necessary for peace. The scribe breathes deeply, feeling his shoulders drop as tension he didn't even realize he was carrying begins to dissolve. Tomorrow there will be more teachings to record, more revolutionary ideas to preserve for future generations. Tonight, there is simply this, the perfect sufficiency of now. A fishing boat moves slowly across the moonlit water below, its single lamp a tiny point of light in the vast darkness. The scribe watches its steady progress and thinks about the fisherman aboard, probably a simple man with calloused hands and weathered skin, someone who might never attend a philosophical lecture, but who understands something essential about working with natural rhythms rather than against them. There's wisdom in that small boat, in the patient way it moves with the current rather than fighting it, in the trust required to venture onto dark water, guided only by stars and experience. This, too, is Stoicism in action, the practical philosophy of accepting what you cannot control while taking full responsibility for what you can. The path continues along the coast, and the scribe follows it slowly, in no hurry to reach any destination. Each step brings new perspectives, new angles of moonlight on water, new configurations of shadow and stone. Nothing dramatic happens, no profound revelations strike like lightning, but something deeper settles into place with each measured breath. This is what the ancient teachings point toward, not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of something unshakable within yourself, something that remains constant whether the sea is calm or stormy, whether life brings joy or sorrow, whether others approve or disapprove of your choices. The scribe finds a smooth boulder and sits for a while, listening to the eternal conversation between wave and shore. The sound is hypnotic, rhythmic, like a lullaby that has been sung since the beginning of time. He closes his eyes and lets it wash over him. This reminder that he is part of something much larger than his individual concerns. When he opens his eyes again, the stars seem brighter, more present. The constellation patterns that sailors use for navigation spread across the dark canvas above, reliable guides that have helped countless travelers find their way home. He traces familiar shapes with his gaze: the great bear, the swan, the crown, each one a story written in light. The women who come to hear Epictetus speak are navigating by different stars, the inner constellations of wisdom and courage and self-respect. They're learning to chart their course not by others' expectations, but by the true north of their own deepest values. It's revolutionary work, this business of claiming your own life, and it requires the same kind of patient skill that sailors develop over years of reading wind and current and sky. A cool breeze rises from the water, carrying the scent of distant islands and unknown shores. The scribe pulls his cloak closer and continues his slow walk along the cliff path. There's something profoundly comforting about this ancient ritual. Humans walking by water under stars, connecting with rhythms that transcend individual lifetimes. He thinks about the parchments waiting back in his chamber, the careful records he's keeping of teachings that might otherwise be lost. Important work, but not urgent in this moment. The sea doesn't hurry. The stars don't rush. The earth turns at its own majestic pace. And there's deep wisdom in remembering that not everything needs to happen quickly. As the path curves back toward the town, the scribe carries with him something that can't be captured in words, a sense of belonging to the larger story, of being held by forces both ancient and eternal. Tomorrow he'll return to his careful work of preservation, but tonight has reminded him why that work matters, not just as historical record, but as invitation. An invitation for each person to discover the unshakable peace that comes from living in harmony with what is, rather than in constant struggle with what isn't. The lights of Nicopolis twinkle ahead, warm and welcoming, calling him back to human community and the shared work of growing in wisdom. But he carries the vastness with him now, the reminder that peace was never something to be achieved, but something to be remembered, something that was always there, waiting patiently, like moonlight on water, like starlight on stone, like the eternal rhythm of waves returning home to shore. Simple rituals, profound meaning. The scribe makes his way back through the quiet streets, his sandals soft against worn stone, carrying within him the peace of the evening shore. The town sleeps gently around him, but here and there, warm light spills from windows where others keep their own quiet vigil with wisdom, with prayer, with the simple tasks that sustain a life. He pauses at the fountain in the small square, watching moonlight dance on the water's surface. Even here, in this humble place, the same principles shine through. The fountain gives freely, without counting the cost, without demanding recognition for its service. It simply flows, as it was made to flow, finding its purpose in the giving. This is what he has been learning to see in the months since he began attending the school, how philosophy lives not in grand gestures, but in the smallest choices, in the way Helena tends her herb garden each morning, grateful for what grows, accepting what withers, in the way old Marcus sweeps the courtyard, not because anyone asks, but because the work itself has become a form of prayer. The scribe reaches his modest dwelling, a single room above the baker's shop, and climbs the narrow stairs. His writing materials wait where he left them. Papyrus and ink, the tools of his trade, but also something more now. They have become instruments of preservation, ways of honoring what might otherwise be lost. He lights his small oil lamp, settles at his simple wooden table, and returns to the work that has become his calling. Tonight he transcribes words about the morning routines, the daily practices that Epictetus teaches, not as burdens to be borne, but as opportunities for growth. Each dawn, The philosopher had said, "We are given a fresh start, a clean slate upon which to practice virtue." The scribe remembers watching the women in the group nod at these words, understanding perhaps better than anyone how precious such fresh starts can be, how healing it is to know that yesterday's mistakes need not define today's choices. He writes carefully, preserving not just the words, but the feeling in the room when they were spoken, the way Lydia's shoulders relaxed, as if setting down a burden she had carried too long, the way young Sophia leaned forward, hungry for permission to begin again, to try once more with gentleness toward herself. The lamp flame flickers, casting dancing shadows on the wall, and the scribe pauses to trim the wick, to tend this small light that makes his work possible. Even this simple act, he realizes, is philosophy in practice. Attention to what serves, care for what sustains, gratitude for what illuminates the path ahead. He returns to his writing, documenting the afternoon lesson about daily gratitude. Epictetus had spoken of the practice of acknowledging gifts, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle blessings that often go unnoticed. The ability to breathe, to think, to choose one's response to whatever the day might bring. Gratitude, the teacher had explained, is not about pretending hardship doesn't exist, but about recognizing that even in difficulty, there are threads of grace, if we train ourselves to see them. The scribe had watched the faces around the courtyard, seeing understanding dawn like sunrise. These women knew hardship, knew disappointment, knew the weight of expectations and the sting of judgment, but they were learning something revolutionary, that their peace need not depend on their circumstances changing, but on their relationship to those circumstances transforming. A gentle breeze stirs through his window, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and he pauses to breathe it in, to let this small pleasure register fully. This too is practice, this conscious receiving of beauty, this deliberate opening to what the moment offers freely. He writes about the evening meal preparation he had observed, how the students and teachers worked together, each contributing what they could, no task too humble, no service too small. Helena kneading bread, her hands sure and practiced, finding meditation in the rhythm, Sophia drawing water from the well, carrying it carefully, honoring the gift of what sustains life. And Marcus, dear Marcus, slowly chopping vegetables with arthritic hands, refusing offers of help, not from stubbornness, but from understanding that the work itself was part of his practice, part of his path toward wisdom. "Let me do what I can do," he had said gently, "while I can still do it, and let that be enough." The scribe's pen moves steadily across the papyrus, preserving these moments that might seem ordinary, but which he now understands are anything but. They are the building blocks of a philosophical life, the daily choices that either move us toward wisdom or away from it. He documents the quiet conversations over the simple meal, how the food was received with genuine appreciation, how the company was treasured, how even the cleanup became an opportunity for mindful attention. Dishes washed with care, tables wiped clean, the space prepared for tomorrow's gathering, all of it done with presence, with gratitude, with love. Outside his window, the town settles deeper into sleep, but the scribe continues his work, feeling no urgency, no pressure to finish, only a quiet satisfaction in the process itself. This is what the teachings have given him, this ability to find meaning in the moment at hand, rather than always reaching toward some future completion. He writes about the evening's closing circle, how they had sat together in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, each person holding their own thoughts, their own prayers, their own quiet intentions for growth, No words needed, just the simple communion of shared seeking, shared commitment to becoming more than they had been. Epictetus had spoken briefly, reminding them that philosophy is not about perfection, but about practice. We are all students here, he had said, learning to live with greater wisdom, greater compassion, greater peace. Some days we remember our lessons well, other days we forget, and both are part of the path. The scribe had felt such relief in those words, such permission to be human, to stumble and begin again, to treat each mistake as information rather than condemnation. He sees now how revolutionary this is, especially for the women who have been taught to expect perfection from themselves, to carry shame for every failing. His lamp burns steadily, providing just enough light for his work, asking nothing more than oil to sustain its flame, giving freely of its illumination. Like the fountain, like the evening breeze, like all the simple gifts that surround him, it teaches by example, showing him how to be useful without being demanding, how to serve without seeking recognition. The scribe sets down his pen, stretches his shoulders, and looks out at the peaceful night. Tomorrow will bring new lessons, new insights to preserve, new moments of quiet revelation to document. But tonight, this moment, is complete in itself, perfect in its simplicity, sacred in its ordinariness. He extinguishes the lamp, settles onto his simple bed, and lets the darkness embrace him. The work continues, even in sleep, even in dreams. The slow transformation that comes from paying attention, from choosing gratitude, from finding the profound meaning hidden within the simplest rituals of being human. Preserving the past. The morning arrives with gentle fingers of light, creeping through the narrow window of the scroll repository, illuminating dust motes that dance like tiny spirits above the precious manuscripts. Our scribe awakens not in his bed, but here among the papyrus and parchment, having fallen asleep at his writing table once again, his cheek pressed against yesterday's careful transcription. He lifts his head slowly, blinking away the soft confusion of dawn, and finds himself surrounded by the life's work that has consumed him. Scrolls line the walls in careful rows, each one a vessel carrying wisdom across the vast ocean of time. The air smells of dried reeds and ink, of preservation and permanence, of the deep satisfaction that comes from work that matters. This room, this sacred repository, holds more than words on papyrus. It holds the revolutionary idea that ordinary people, especially the women who gather quietly at the edges of philosophical discussions, deserve access to wisdom that can transform their daily struggles into opportunities for growth. Each scroll represents hours of careful listening, precise transcription, and the unwavering belief that these teachings must survive. The scribe runs his fingers along the smooth surface of a completed manuscript, feeling the slight texture where the reed pen pressed into the papyrus. This particular scroll contains Epictetus's teachings about emotional resilience, words that he watched land like gentle rain on the upturned faces of women who had never been told they possessed such inner strength. The memory of their quiet recognition, their subtle nods of understanding, gives weight to his preservation work. He moves through the repository with practiced reverence, checking the cedar boxes that protect the most valuable texts from moisture and insects. The Romans understood the importance of preservation, but this scribe brings something more to the task, a personal investment in ensuring that wisdom reaches beyond the privileged few. His hands work with the tenderness of someone tending a garden, knowing that these seeds of understanding will bloom in minds not yet born. The process of creating scrolls is itself a meditation on patience and attention. He remembers the careful selection of papyrus reeds, how they must be cut at just the right angle, soaked for precisely the right duration, pressed and dried with the kind of mindful presence that Epictetus teaches. Each sheet becomes a canvas for transformation, ready to carry ideas that can shift the trajectory of a human life. The scribe examines a scroll about the discipline of desire, noting how the ink has settled into the fibers with permanence. These words about finding contentment, about distinguishing between what we need and what we think we want, they seem to resonate especially deeply with the women listeners. He had watched them exchange meaningful glances during this particular lesson, recognizing truths they had intuited but never heard, articulated with such clarity. Storage requires its own wisdom, its own careful attention to detail. The scrolls must be positioned to allow air circulation, protected from the dampness that creeps in during the rainy season, shielded from the direct sunlight that could fade the precious ink. Each manuscript is wrapped in protective cloth, labeled with careful notation about its contents and the date of transcription. The scribe pauses before a series of scrolls containing teachings about daily practice, remembering how Epictetus emphasized that philosophy lives not in abstract concepts, but in the small choices we make each moment. These preserved words carry the power to transform ordinary frustrations into opportunities for wisdom, to help future readers find peace in the midst of circumstances they cannot control. He notices how the morning light catches the simple pottery vessels that hold his ink and writing implements. There is something profound about these humble tools, these ordinary objects that enable extraordinary preservation. The clay was shaped by anonymous hands, fired in kilns tended by craftspeople whose names history will not remember. Yet their contribution makes possible the transmission of wisdom across generations. A small ceramic pot holds the fine sand used for drying fresh ink. Another contains the mixture of soot and gum that creates the permanent black letters. These simple vessels, unremarkable in their individual existence, become sacred through their participation in something larger than themselves. Like the women who listen quietly at the edges of philosophical gatherings, their value lies not in recognition, but in their essential contribution to the whole. The scribe carefully prepares a fresh reed pen, trimming the tip with the sharp knife that has become an extension of his hand. The ritual of preparation centers him, connects him to the long tradition of scribes who have preserved human wisdom through turbulent centuries. His work joins an ancient chain of dedication, each link forged by someone who understood that knowledge dies without preservation. He unrolls a partially completed manuscript, one that captures Epictetus's teachings about the discipline of action, about how to engage with the world from a place of inner stability rather than reactive emotion. The scribe remembers the particular afternoon when these words were spoken, how the light slanted through the windows of the school, how the women in attendance seemed to breathe more deeply as they absorbed concepts that validated their own experiences of finding strength in acceptance. The preservation work requires not just accuracy but interpretation, the ability to capture not only the words but the spirit behind them. The scribe has developed an intuitive sense for which teachings carry the most transformative power, which concepts need additional context to bridge the gap between the speaker's intent and the future reader's understanding. A completed scroll lies ready for storage, its wooden rollers smooth from careful sanding, the papyrus sheets joined with precision that will allow the manuscript to be unrolled and read for decades, perhaps centuries, to come. This particular text contains teachings about gratitude, about the revolutionary practice of finding abundance in what already exists rather than constantly seeking more. The scribe reflects on how these preserved teachings create a kind of conversation across time, how a woman centuries in the future might unroll this very scroll during her own moment of struggle, finding in these ancient words exactly the perspective she needs to transform her understanding. the preservation work becomes a form of service to people he will never meet, a gift offered across the vast expanse of years. As the morning light grows stronger, illuminating the careful organization of the repository, the scribe feels the deep satisfaction that comes from work aligned with purpose. These scrolls represent more than preserved philosophy. They embody the radical belief that wisdom belongs to everyone, that the insights that bring peace and resilience deserve to survive the fragility of individual memory. He returns to his transcription table, ready to continue the patient work of preservation, knowing that each word carefully copied, each teaching accurately recorded, extends the reach of transformation beyond the immediate moment. The work continues, steady and purposeful, like the gradual accumulation of wisdom itself, building something permanent from the most ordinary materials, creating legacy from the simple act of paying attention. Finding peace in the present, the scribe sets down his stylus, feeling the weight of completion settle into his bones like the gentle exhaustion that follows meaningful labor. Around him, the repository breathes with the quiet presence of countless preserved thoughts, each scroll a bridge between the wisdom of today and the seeking hearts of tomorrow. He understands now, in this moment of finishing, that his work has been more than mere transcription. It has been an act of faith in the continuity of human understanding. Outside his window, the city of Nicopolis settles into its evening rhythms, oil lamps flickering to life in distant windows like scattered stars brought down to earth. The same moonlight that illuminated Epictetus teaching in the courtyard now bathes the scribe's workspace, connecting this moment of quiet completion with all the moments of discovery that came before. He can almost hear the echo of voices, the women who gathered to listen, their questions still reverberating through the scrolls he has so carefully preserved. The teachings rest now in permanent form, ready to travel beyond these walls, beyond this time, carrying their transformative power into futures he cannot imagine. Each carefully formed letter holds within it the potential for recognition, for that moment when a weary soul discovers that the peace they seek has always resided within their own capacity to choose their response to whatever life presents. The scribe smiles, knowing that somewhere in the distant reaches of time, his careful work will offer comfort to those who need it most. He thinks of the lesson that emerged most clearly through his months of documentation, that true freedom comes not from changing external circumstances, but from understanding what lies within our power to influence. This wisdom, born in the philosophical schools of ancient Greece and refined in the practical teachings of Epictetus, holds the same relevance for every generation that discovers it. The human heart, with its capacity for both suffering and transcendence, remains remarkably consistent across the centuries. In his transcriptions, he has witnessed how these ideas particularly resonated with the women who attended the teachings, those who had spent lifetimes feeling powerless in the face of circumstances beyond their control, to learn that they possessed an unassailable inner citadel, a place where their true freedom resided, was revolutionary. This knowledge, that no external force could touch their essential dignity and capacity for wisdom, transformed not just their understanding, but their very way of moving through the world. The scribe reflects on how the practice of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control becomes, with repetition, a source of profound peace, like water finding its natural level. The mind learns to flow around obstacles rather than exhaust itself in futile resistance. This is not passive acceptance, but active engagement with reality as it is, rather than as we wish it were. In this engagement, unexpected possibilities emerge, solutions that were invisible when we were focused on forcing outcomes. He remembers documenting the morning discussions, where students learn to examine their automatic responses, to pause in that crucial space between stimulus and reaction where choice lives. This pause, brief as a heartbeat but vast as the sky, contains all the freedom any human being could ever need. Within it, we can choose patience over anger, understanding over judgment, compassion over criticism. The practice of finding this pause and using it wisely becomes a form of daily spiritual exercise. The teachings about living in accordance with nature return to him now, not nature as some external force to be conquered or appeased, but nature as the fundamental order that includes our own capacity for reason and virtue. To live naturally, in this sense, means to live in harmony with our highest capabilities, to respond to challenges with wisdom rather than react with mere emotion. This alignment brings a deep satisfaction, the peace that comes from knowing we are living as we were meant to live. As the scribe organizes his final scrolls, he considers how the practice of gratitude wove through every lesson, not as forced optimism, but as recognition of the abundance that already exists in each moment. Even in difficulty, there are gifts, opportunities for growth, chances to practice virtues that remain dormant in easier times. This perspective transforms suffering from meaningless pain into meaningful challenge, each obstacle becoming a chance to strengthen the qualities we most wish to cultivate. The repository around him feels alive with potential, these preserved words ready to kindle recognition in hearts not yet born. He imagines future readers discovering these teachings during their own moments of struggle, finding in these ancient insights the tools they need to navigate contemporary challenges. The specifics of life may change, but the fundamental human need for wisdom, for peace, for understanding how to live well, remains constant across all eras. The scribe's work has taught him that philosophy is not abstract theory, but practical guidance for daily living. Every interaction, every choice, every response to unexpected circumstances becomes an opportunity to apply these principles. The kitchen where meals are prepared with mindful attention, the conversations where we choose listening over being right, the moments when we catch ourselves in judgment and choose curiosity instead, these are where wisdom lives and grows. He thinks of the women who will read these words centuries hence, carrying different burdens but the same essential humanity, seeking the same fundamental peace. They will discover, as the women in Epictetus's time discovered, that their strength was never dependent on external validation, that their worth was never subject to others' opinions, that their capacity for wisdom and virtue belongs to them alone, unassailable and eternal. The moonlight shifts across his workspace, marking the passage of time while illuminating truths that exist outside of time. The scribe feels the deep satisfaction of work completed, not because the task is finished, for the work of preserving and sharing wisdom is never truly done, but because this portion has been accomplished with care and dedication. These scrolls will survive the fragility of memory, carrying their precious cargo into whatever future awaits. In the quiet of the repository, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of generations, the scribe experiences the peace that comes from contributing to something larger than oneself. His individual efforts, humble as they are, become part of an endless chain of transmission, each link essential, each contribution meaningful. This is perhaps the deepest teaching of all, that our lives find their fullest meaning when we serve purposes that extend beyond our own immediate concerns. The city sleeps now, but the ideas preserved in these scrolls remain wakeful, ready to kindle understanding in any mind that approaches them with genuine seeking. The scribe extinguishes his lamp, knowing that the light he has helped preserve will continue burning in ways he cannot foresee. illuminating paths for travelers he will never meet, offering comfort and guidance across the vast expanse of human experience. As he prepares for rest, the scribe carries with him the profound contentment that comes from work well done, from service freely given, from participating in the eternal human endeavor of passing wisdom from one generation to the next, knowing that in this simple act of preservation, he has touched something immortal, something that will continue reaching toward hearts that hunger for understanding, for peace, for the recognition that they already possess everything they need to live with dignity, with purpose, with the unshakable tranquility that comes from knowing their true home has always been and will always be the unconquerable sanctuary of their own wise and choosing heart.